Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tracy Philippi. I'm the library specialist for the Village of Cottage Grove. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be made available on the Village of Cottage Grove Library Board's YouTube page. I'll put the link to the YouTube page in the comments. This presentation is for informational purposes only, and we will not be taking questions today. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan grassroots political organization established in 1920. They advocate for informed and active participation in government. The League welcomes anyone who wishes to improve our systems of government and impact public policies through education and advocacy. Our speaker today is Brooke Solvwet, and she is,
Sweat.
thank you. She's been an active member of the League of Women Voters of Dane County for more than 15 years, including serving as president, vice president, webmaster, and as a member of the Voter Services Steering Committee. For the last 8 years, she has been a City of Madison election official at every election, serving as chief inspector, special voting deputy, and whisk vote user for in-person absentee voting. She's always happy to help any eligible voter cast their ballot. So thank you for being here today, Brooke.
Thanks very much. I'm really happy that people are interested in learning about absentee voting. And I want to kind of apologize in advance that I'm not a big techno expert. So if I fumble on the slides, please be forgiving. Tracy already gave my introduction here that I have been with the League since 2008. We are nonpartisan, we are nonprofit, and we do not endorse candidates or parties, but we do take positions on issues after we do study. But our main goal is empowering voters and defending democracy. So most of my experience with absentee voting has to do with my work as an election official with the City of Madison. But I want to make it really clear that I am not speaking for the City of Madison here. I am speaking for the League of Women Voters of Dane County. But I want to clarify that because my experience is with the City of Madison, if most of you who are watching are from a village or town, the Village of Cottage Grove, things will probably be different because smaller clerk's offices don't have the same kind of issues that we have, or the number of voters as the City of Madison. So coming up on April 1st is our next election. Wisconsin has a set of elections every spring for their nonpartisan offices. And then we have elections in the fall on even-numbered years for the partisan offices. A lot of people just sort of vote when they're told that there's an election and don't understand that distinction, but that may be helpful for you to know that you will not be seeing party tags on any of the issues on this election. So among the things that may be on your ballot, depending on where you live, everyone in Wisconsin will have a Wisconsin constitutional amendment, a race for the superintendent of public instruction, the Supreme Court justice, which you've probably seen and heard about for months now on TV till you're tired of it. There are also appeals court judge, circuit court judges, and in Madison, there's a municipal court judge on the ballot. The Dane County executive race is here again. There are 2 Dane County board districts that are electing supervisors this time around. There are 2 mayoral races. Cities have alder races, and towns and villages are electing their officers. There are also school board races throughout Dane County, and there are 3 schools that are having school board referendums. And for my work with the League of Women Voters, we only deal with the city elections, so there are likely to be referendums in some of the towns and villages that I'm not even aware of. So we're talking about ways to vote by absentee ballot. In the spring, a lot of people may still be, if they're snowbirds, they may be still living in their warmer climate. They may be traveling to visit. They may be on spring break vacations and want to be able to vote even though they won't be here on election day. There are many different ways that you can vote by absentee. There is by mail, which is probably the most common method. You can also vote in the 10 days before an election, or the 2 weeks before an election, you can vote in person at your clerk's office or an alternative location. Residents of care facilities, nursing homes, and assisted living facilities can also vote with pairs of election officials called special voting deputies that actually go to their facility or even to their room to help them to vote. And if you're hospitalized in the last week before an election, you can vote by absentee with a designated agent. But since mail is the most common method, let's start talking about how you go about voting absentee by mail. Many of you are probably already familiar with myvote.wi.gov. That is a Wisconsin website that is the voter side view of the statewide database for all voters, which is called WisVote. Then WisVote is used by the Election Commission and by clerks, but individual voters can see their voting information and general information like where polling places are or what might be on their ballot. So what I'd like to do is just take a quick cruise over to, let's see. Now this is where my problems arise. Okay, I'm going to take a quick look here at the My Vote website, which is right here. And I'm hoping you can see that. So the URL for that is myvote.wi.gov. And this part of the URL, the ENUS, means that we're looking at the US English version of it. If you scroll down a little bit farther, you can see that there is an option to view this information in Spanish. So if you know Spanish speakers, they can still use the system without relying on anybody to translate. There are tiles at the top that allow you to do various functions related to voting and information about specific activities for the next election. And we'll go through some of this later, but what I'd like to look at now is this module that you'll find on absentee voting. And if you want to come back to this later, I just want to give you a little hint. Once you move away to other parts of My Vote, this will disappear. So if you want to see this about absentee voting again, you'll want to be at just the original myvote.wi.gov and clear out anything else that comes in the URL after that. So in this module, you can click this Learn How to Vote Absentee, and you get an entire tutorial. Everything you'd want to know about how to do it. It's how you can request an absentee ballot, how you can track that request and the travels of your ballot getting to you, instructions for how to fill out your ballot and contact your clerk, how you get the ballot back to your clerk and how you can track that journey, and options for voting in person with your clerk, and how you can find your polling place on election day. And the Elections Commission has also developed 3 very short videos. They're 2.5 minutes on different topics about absentee voting. So again, if you'd like to review any of this, it's easily at hand if you go to myvote.wi.gov and then find these videos. I'm going to just show this one video. How can I get an absentee ballot? Because it has some nice animations that I'm not able to recreate. And then when I talk about some of the topics, you'll have that visual in mind. So here is this video. I hope that the sound will work. Let's see.
As Wisconsin gets ready for the upcoming election, people are asking, how can I get an absentee ballot and vote by mail? Here's how it's done. Eligible voters who'd like to vote early and in person can cast an absentee ballot at their municipal clerk's office. To vote absentee by mail, you'll need to request a ballot so one can be sent to you. But before you can do either, you have to be registered to vote. Voter registration ensures that everyone who participates in a Wisconsin election is eligible to vote. There are many ways to get registered. One option, registering to vote online at myvote.wi.gov. Even if you think you're registered, it's a good idea to verify your info. If your name or address has changed since the last election, you'll need to update your voter record before requesting an absentee ballot. You can do it all at myvote.wi.gov in minutes. Once you know you're registered to vote, you can request an absentee ballot online in a few steps. Just confirm your name and current address and choose the election or elections you'd like to vote by absentee ballot in. Need to provide an acceptable photo ID? You can scan it or take a picture with a smartphone or mobile device. Upload the image and you're done. One important part of requesting an absentee ballot: acting early. It takes your local clerk time to verify your voter record and the post office time to deliver your absentee ballot. It also takes you time to fill it out correctly, get it witnessed, and make sure it arrives by election day. Now that you know how to request an absentee ballot, you can decide if it's right for you. If it is, make sure you're ready to vote absentee in Wisconsin's next election. You can register to vote online up to 20 days before a Wisconsin election. And the deadline for requesting an absentee ballot is always the Thursday before Election Day for most voters. Get started at myvote.wi.gov.
Okay. Now, can I get back to my to the rest of my screen?
As Wisconsin gets ready
Oops,
for the
sorry,
upcoming
we don't want to hear
election,
you again.
people are asking.
Okay, back to my slides. Okay, so just to go review a few of the things that they went through very quickly. My vote has, well, actually, let me go back and show you my, well, no, it's not necessary. The first few things on this list, like polling place, clerk information, elected officials, and sample ballot, are kind of generic information that is related to anybody who lives at your address. So you can, there's a place in my vote where you can put in address information, and that is not specific to you, but it's specific to your location, and it will allow you to find information that people often want. If you put in your name and your date of birth, if you do it by name, then you can actually view your entire voter participation record. You can check your voter registration. You can update that registration if you've had a name or address change, and that's where you can request the absentee ballot. So a couple of things that video that we just saw emphasize are you don't have to, actually, maybe they don't even say that in this video. You don't have to have a reason for voting absentee. In some states, they will only give you an absentee ballot if you can prove that there's a reason that you won't be able to vote on election day. But anyone can request an absentee ballot in Wisconsin. You have to meet the same requirements that you would if you were voting in person. And that means you have to be registered to vote at your current address, and you have to provide acceptable photo ID. And one hint that I will provide if you're trying to do this request online now is it's easier to use a phone to do this through My Vote, because you can take the photo of your license with the phone and then immediately upload it. Otherwise, you have to find a way to transfer the photo file to your computer if you're trying to do it that way. So when do you request a mailed ballot? I want to focus in this talk on a lot of the errors that people make, because one of the most heartbreaking things as an election official is to see someone who thinks they're going to be able to vote or thinks they have voted, and something goes wrong with what they did and their ballot doesn't count. So one of the most important things about an absentee ballot, voting absentee by mail especially, is the timing. And for spring elections, ballots are mailed 3 weeks before the spring election. They aren't even available until 3 weeks before the election. Clerks don't have them to send out. But by law, they're mailed out 3 weeks before the spring election. And 3 weeks is not a lot of time for that ballot to be mailed to you, for you to turn it around, and for it to get back to the clerk's office in time to be counted, because it has to arrive by election day. Another issue for a lot of people who vote by absentee, especially in this season where we've just come off of a year where there were 4 elections and it seemed like every time you turned around, you were getting another ballot in the mail. Your ballot request is only good for 1 calendar year. So you may have been getting ballots for every election last year, but you're going to have to after January 1st, request ballots for that year. So if you were expecting a ballot for the February election and didn't get it, it's probably because you didn't make a new request for that year. So timing in terms of when you make the request within the year, and timing in terms of making sure you're requesting it soon enough to get the ballot. By law, you can continue to request that ballot up until Thursday before an election, and that may have been sensible in the days when a letter was turned around by mail in 1 day. But 7 days is all the post office will commit to. And for the spring primary election, which is held in February of each year, it's always the first day after the President's Day postal holiday. So it can be 10 days then before you can get your ballot. And it's heartbreaking if you went through all the work and it just doesn't get counted because of time. So one of the other things that was mentioned that you saw in the My Vote tutorial is that you can track your absentee ballot. So when you request your absentee ballot, you can click on this tile under absentee status to start the request process. But then as each step is completed, the tiles will turn blue. Your absentee request is approved by your clerk. They're preparing your ballot. They've sent it in the mail to you. Now you work on your absentee to send it back, and when the clerk's office receives it, the final tile will turn blue. Now, if the clerk's office receives the ballot, but there's a problem with it, there's some issue with why they think they can't count that ballot, this tile will be orange. And so it's a good idea a couple days after you've mailed your ballot back, just to check online at My Vote and see if it's turned blue or if it's flashing orange. Clerks will try to contact a voter if they have a problem with the ballot, but if it gets towards too close to election day, they may not have the time. And what many people don't always realize, especially around election time, is that clerks have a lot of responsibilities besides just elections. And in villages and towns, they're sometimes part-time and quite very much part-time. So they'll always do their best, but they won't always be able to help you if you've made an error. If doing things online on My Vote is just not your way of doing it, you can also request your absentee ballot by mail, either postal mail, email, or fax, and you can even request it in person by going to your clerk's office. In any of those cases, you will be asked to provide your name, address, date of birth, a copy of your voter photo ID. Of course, you also have to be a registered voter. And you have to say for which elections, if you only want a ballot for specific elections or if you want them for the whole year. And if you're going to be wanting that ballot mailed to somewhere other than your home address, you need to specify that. All right, you've put in your request. What's going to come to you in the mail? It's not just going to be a ballot in an envelope. You're going to get a large outer envelope, a ballot, a certificate envelope for returning your voted ballot, and it's a postage paid, so you don't have to worry about stamps to get it returned, and instructions. One of the problems that we often see is that when people are opening their envelope of materials, they accidentally slice the ballot or they slice the envelope. So when you're opening that big envelope, you're going to want to use caution so that you don't tear those important materials inside. Also, I'd like to urge you to keep all of those parts together, because A ballot that doesn't have a certificate envelope can't be brought back. And if you lose the instructions, chances are your ballot will also not be completed in a way that will count. So the first thing to remember is that you need to complete that ballot in the presence of a witness. The ballot needs to be blank when you show it to the witness to prove that that somebody else didn't already complete it. So the witness isn't watching how you vote the ballot, but they need to watch you in the process of completing it. You need to use a black or a blue pen. If you use some other color, or if you use a pencil, the tabulators at the polling place will not be able to read your ballot. And so it will need to be remade at the polling place. And we'll discuss that in detail later. You need to fill in the bubbles to mark your selections. If you put a tiny dot in the bubble, if you put a big X over the bubble, if you circle the name or yes or no, those things are also not going to be read by the tabulator, and election officials will have to remake your ballot. You'll want to vote for the right number of candidates. We find, especially for primary elections, many people are thinking, well, the top 2 candidates are going to move on to the final election ballot, so I get to vote for 2. But no, you probably can't vote for 2. And in some cases, particularly school board races, there may be 2 or 3 or even sometimes 4 seats that are available. And you are encouraged to vote for that many candidates. You don't have to, but you can vote up to that many. So the instructions next to each race are going to tell you, vote for 1, vote for 2, or whatever the case may be. So please look at that carefully as you're voting. Also, check both sides of the ballot to make sure that you aren't missing any races or questions. As you saw from the list at the beginning, there's going to be quite a lot on this ballot, and you don't want to go through all this trouble and then miss an important race. Again, follow the instructions. What I'm showing you here is this certificate envelope I've been talking about. And this envelope is both your request for an absentee ballot and and it has your attestation that you are the one who voted the ballot, and the attestation of the witness that they saw you vote the ballot. So after the witness has watched that you completed the ballot, you're going to seal it inside this envelope. You're going to sign here where it says voter signature. Then your witness will both sign and print their name. And the witness also has to print their address. So when I was talking about how the clerk may have a little orange thing saying that you've received your ballot, but it's having trouble, they have some trouble with it. If your certificate envelope is missing any of these elements, your voter signature, witness signature, printed name, or witness address, the ballot cannot be counted. And if it gets to the clerk in time and they're able to contact you, it is possible for the voter and the same witness to come to the clerk's office and correct this, complete the information that's missing. But those same 2 people have to be the ones who are present when this is done. All right, the scolding finger again. Follow the instructions. The ballot has to be returned so that it is received by election day. And there's more than just mail as an option for getting it back. You can mail it back if you make sure that it's going to be done early enough. You can return it to an early voting location for your municipality. So in Madison, that could be one of the in-person sites around the community, like in the public libraries and in community centers and on campuses. But for most villages and towns and even smaller cities, that early voting location would probably be in your clerk's office. But I want to stress that you need to return it to your own municipality. If someone from Middleton brings their ballot to drop off at a Madison in-person absentee voting site, and the election official doesn't pay attention and realize that it's for Middleton, they're not going to get it to Middleton by hand. They're going to, when it gets back to the clerk's office, it's going to get dropped in the mail, and it's not going to get there as quickly as you thought. You can also return your ballot to an official drop box for ballots if your municipality has one. And in most municipalities in Dane County, that would be at the clerk's office or at the clerk's outside the municipal building for that municipality, but they may not have a drop box. They don't need to. In Madison, there are other drop boxes around the city, most of which are outside fire stations. And those are emptied at 5 o'clock every day, but each municipality will have a different schedule. Again, if someone from Milwaukee who happens to be visiting here decides to drop off their ballot in a Madison drop box, after those ballots are picked up and taken back to the clerk's office and sorted, it's just going to be dropped in the mail. Finally, you can return your ballot yourself to your polling place on election day, even though you received it as an absentee ballot in the mail. But again, it has to be your polling place, not the polling place that is near your kid's basketball practice or your office or on your way to the symphony. And I think this might be the last nag. If a voter is going to personally deliver a ballot, it has to be the voter delivering their own ballot. The only exception is if a voter has a disability that prevents them from doing that, they can get assistance from anybody in returning their ballot, as long as that person assisting them is not their employer and not their union steward. And again, so many absentee ballots don't get counted because they make one of these mistakes or they get to their clerk too late. At the canvass of the vote, which is held every Friday after an election, the City of Madison clerk tells us how many ballots have arrived since election day. And for just the small primary that we had in February, 348 ballots had arrived too late to be counted, and they were still coming in the following week. So enough on that. So then we've talked about how to do the mailing in the ballot mailed to you and the ways you can return it. But now I'd like to talk about the other option, which is in-person absentee voting. So for beginning 2 weeks before an election, so that would be the Tuesday, 2 weeks before, and running for 10 days, which is, or up to 10 days, which is through the Sunday before the election. Clerks may offer in-person absentee voting. They don't have to, and they can offer them on specific times and dates and locations. So since the times and locations will vary, it's a really good idea for you to check My Vote or your municipal clerk's website to find out what your options are in your municipality. Okay, it's called in-person absentee voting with the acronym IPAV. And a lot of people ask me how does that make sense? What does that even mean? How can it be in person if it's absentee? Why is it an absentee vote if I'm here in person? So I'll try to make sense of it in this way. Where are you and who's counting your ballot? If you're an absentee voter, it means you never met up with the clerk at all. Your ballot came to you by mail, you returned it by some means, and it was then processed by the clerk's office. And it's an election official who is putting your ballot through the tabulator. You are absent at the time that your ballot is being counted. In person, and when you're voting in person at the polling place, that's just in-person voting because you are in person when you get the ballot from an election official directly, you vote it, and you are the one putting it in person through the tabulator. In-person absentee voting is that hybrid where you are in person with a clerk to receive your ballot and to mark the ballot. But then the election officials have custody of that ballot until election day, and then they're the ones who check it into the poll book and who process the ballot and run it through the tabulator. So that is why it's called in-person absentee voting, and I hope now maybe it makes sense. So for in-person absentee voting, again, just like for mail absentee voting, you need to be registered to vote. And since you're going to be with election officials, you also can register in person while you're before you vote at the in-person absentee voting site. So if you aren't registered or if you have moved since the last time you voted, you are able to complete that step at the in-person absentee voting. But you can only do that through the Friday before an election because the law says that's the last day that people can register until election day. At in-person absentee voting, you'll be asked for the same information. You'll complete your name, your street address, and your date of birth on a certificate envelope. And you'll be asked to show your voter photo ID. Then the election official that you're working with will have a laptop connected to the WisVote or a computer in the clerk's office. Will have the WisVote database, and they will look up your registration, make sure that you that the database has your current address. They will check your photo ID. And then they'll use that WisVote database to print a label that has your voter information and a unique barcode. And then they'll activate a ballot for you to vote. You'll vote the ballot, you'll seal it in that certificate envelope, and they will sign the envelope in the presence of you will sign it in the presence of an election official witness. So at home, you might have a spouse or family member or a neighbor witness your voting, but here it will be an election official that will witness it. That witness signs the certificate envelope and completes the address information of the clerk's office. And then the ballot is going to stay in the custody of those election officials until it's counted at the polling place on election day. When the clerks will check and double check that all the information on that certificate envelope has been completed. And as part of the process of issuing you that label, there's also a check to be sure that the voter is not on an ineligible list. So again, when you are voting by in-person absentee voting, you would, before you got there, this whole absentee status set of tiles on My Vote would be completely gray. But once you walk out of there after your ballot has gone, after you voted that ballot, it would say that your completed absentee ballot had been received because it is in the custody of election officials. So another question that I sometimes get is people who wonder how we make sure that people can't vote twice this way, because why couldn't you get an absentee ballot in the mail and then come and vote at in-person absentee voting and then maybe go to the polling place and vote? What are the checks and balances that make sure that that doesn't happen? So if a ballot has been issued to you already by mail, for example, and an election official looks up your name and date of birth, WisVote will show that you have already had a ballot issued to you, and it won't allow the election official to print that required label unless they go through a process of canceling that original ballot. So there are some scenarios where that happens. For example, you may have requested an absentee ballot in the mail, but maybe it hasn't come yet and you're getting worried because it's close to the election. So an election official who saw that notice in WisVote that you have already been issued a ballot would ask the voter, did you already request an absentee ballot? Did you get an absentee ballot? And they may say, well, I haven't gotten it yet. Or maybe they say, yeah, I got it, but I messed it up. Or I got it, but the dog chewed it. Or I got it, but I spilled the coffee on it. So there's a lot of reasons why they may not want to vote that ballot. And so we'll just say, that's all right. We can cancel that ballot. You need to destroy it if you haven't already. And if you return that ballot, you will be prosecuted for the felony, a class 1 felony. Well, you'll be referred for prosecution. The district attorney will make the decision about whether they actually prosecute you. So now let's talk about what happens to your ballot on election day when you aren't there. There are many steps along the way when that certificate envelope with your voter sticker on it or on your voter information on it is checked for completion. And then at your polling place, they'll check to be sure that it has been delivered to the correct ward. And there's a final check for voter ineligibility. So in case a voter has, since they voted, become a felon, we would be able to check against that list and that their ballot would not be counted in that case. So now we have a stack of absentee ballots at the polls. They've been verified that they're ready, that they can be voted. And a poll worker will take those envelopes, your envelope, up to the poll book, and they will stand in for you. They will announce your name and your address, and the poll workers will look you up in their poll book or their badger book, and you will be assigned a voter slip number. Your ballot envelope will be assigned a voter slip number, just as if you were there. Now, what about the circumstance that a voter has voted absentee and also tries to vote in person? Most of the time when this happens, it's not a malicious thing. It's that if in a fall election, they may have voted that ballot 45 days before the election and forgot altogether that they had voted an absentee ballot. I live at Capitol Lakes, which is all retired and people in assisted living, and sometimes your short-term memory isn't so great. You may not remember that 3 weeks ago you voted with the special voting deputies, and you may try to vote again. It's not a malicious intent to commit fraud. It's just forgetting. So if a voter tries to vote, actually votes in person before their absentee envelope has been checked in, then when the absentee ballot comes to be checked in, it will be rejected and the voter will be referred for prosecution. And if an absentee ballot has already been checked in at the poll book and the person comes to vote in person, they won't be issued a ballot. And the poll workers will be able to show them their empty absentee ballot envelope to show them, yes, indeed, they did submit a ballot. So how do we help voters who might inadvertently try to vote twice? I believe that municipalities that use Badger books, which are the sort of electronic poll books, that all of the voting, the absentee voting would be already documented within those. And so a person who came to vote in person would automatically know for sure that they had an absentee ballot. But in Madison, where we still use paper poll books, those poll books get printed as close as possible to election day. But the mail keeps coming in, and in-person absentee voting goes on through the Sunday before election day. So those poll books are not going to be completely up to date, but they will indicate if a voter was issued an absentee ballot and if it has been returned at the time that that the poll books were printed. And so if if a voter were to come up and we already know that the ballot has been returned, even if it hasn't been checked in, we'll tell them. And if a ballot was issued, we will ask again, just like at an in-person absentee site, did you already vote? Did you return your absentee ballot that you were issued? And then we document whatever their response is. Okay, after your certificate envelope has been checked in at the poll book, that's when we actually start processing the ballot inside. So far, the ballot has not been anything that we've been talking about. It's actually the envelope we've been dealing with. So ballots are always processed by 2 election officials because we want to be sure that there's integrity in the process. So you'll have a stack of ballots that have been checked in, and they all have voter slip numbers on them. And they're processed 3 to 5 at a time so that you can preserve the anonymity of the person and their ballot. So a stack of ballots will be in front of you with the certificate label upside down so you don't see the names of those people. And the envelopes would be sliced open carefully. And then the ballots are pulled out one at a time and set aside, verifying that there's really only one envelope, one ballot in each envelope. And then the envelopes are pushed aside so that they're out of the way and no longer associated with the ballots that were inside. Then the 2 election officials, always in pairs, will open up each ballot and examine it. And they'll document anything unusual that they see. If it wasn't properly initialed by the election officials, if the ward wasn't circled, if it wasn't stamped as an absentee ballot, if it was torn and had coffee marks, if it had gotten wet, anything like that they observe would be documented. Now each one is inspected by the pair of election officials. Was the ballot marked so the tabulator can determine voter intent? So these are the things I talked about before. Did they use the right color, black or blue pen? Were the bubbles filled adequately and not overly enthusiastically? Did they vote for more than the number of candidates that's allowed? If there any of those things exists on the ballot, then pairs of election officials have to remake those faulty ballots. And the way that happens is that the original ballot is paired with a blank ballot. Each of them has a sticker on it with a corresponding number. And ours in Madison actually say good ballot and bad ballot. Good ballot number 1, bad ballot number 1. And the pair of election officials will remake the good ballot, trying to determine the voters' intent for all of those races. Everything about this process gets documented. And the original ballots are preserved with all of the voted ballots at the end of the night, so that in the event of a recount, the original and remade ballots can be compared by the election inspectors who are conducting the recount, and make sure that the voters' original intent was carried out in making that second ballot. If the people doing the recount come up with a different explanation and they think that maybe it wasn't really right, then they can adjust the vote totals in that recount. And another part of the transparency of this process is that election observers can watch the entire process. They can't be looking over the shoulder to see exactly how everything is being marked, but they can verify that the people are working together, that nobody's going in there and doing anything fishy. Now, when you have a set of ballots that have been determined that they can go into the tabulator, again, they'll go in twos. They announce and usually they wear a badge on the back of their clothes that says that they are processing absentee ballots, and they will stand at the tabulator and feed those ballots in. So if you're ever at the polling place and you think it looks a little suspicious that there's somebody up there and they're stuffing 9, 10, 12 ballots into the tabulator, they are undoubtedly election officials. So finally, after the election, poll books get reconciled and the voter participation is tracked in the WisVote system. And you can go, it takes some time. Clerks are allowed up to 30 days to track the voter participation, but you can go into My Vote and check to see that you actually voted in an election and whether you voted in person or whether you voted by absentee. So if you go to My Vote right now, you'll see this bright yellow notice that says it may not be ready yet. Wait till 30 days later. So I hope that I was able to clarify and not make overly complicated the process of absentee voting, whether you do it by mail returning it in person, at an in-person absentee voting site, or well, we didn't talk about the special voting deputies and the hospitalized voters, but just very quickly, if you find yourself or a family member or friend hospitalized in the last week before an election, you can go into the My Vote app in the same way that we looked at today, but a week before the election, a new module will a new option will pop up for hospitalized voters. And they can complete the request. They have to upload a copy of their voter ID, and they can designate an agent who will go to the clerk's office, pick up that ballot, bring it to the voter, have the voter, witness the voter completing it, take the voted ballot back to the clerk. So this is fine if you are in the hospital somewhere near where you live, but if you are from Green Bay and you have to come to the University of Wisconsin Hospital for some complicated procedure, somebody is going to have to be driving that ballot a pretty long way back and forth. And there are some intrepid people who do that. In fact, we've had league members who have done that for voters before. Finally, I just want to remind you that maybe you're aware of this, maybe not, but the League of Women Voters always produces a voter guide. It's a nonpartisan voter guide. We ask all the candidates from all the cities. We don't do villages and towns because there are just too many for us to manage. And the state league does the statewide candidates, but we do the county and city and school board races in the county. And we ask the candidates sets of questions, and we print their responses verbatim. And that is put in a guide that is both available online through vote411.org. And it will be a printed guide that you can find in libraries and community centers and Capital Times racks. And we also have it on our website, which is lwvdanecounty.org. And it's there in an electronic flipbook version that makes it easy for you to look up the races that you might be interested in. So those will, for this upcoming election, the April 1st election, we'll be publishing those by Saturday. And they will be distributed in the Wisconsin State Journal next Wednesday as an insert, and also go out on Capital Times news racks. So whether you use the League of Women Voters as a guide, one of the other very painful things we hear is people in line to vote or to absentee vote who say, "Oh, I don't know, I don't even know what's on the ballot. I don't know anything about it." Please do your research ahead of time. Your vote is so important. Your voice is important. And it's a good thing for you to go to trusted sources and learn how those candidates or what those issues involve. So thank you very much. I hope to see you at the polls, and I hope that all of your tiles are filled on my My Vote very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. This was so informational and very informative. We really do appreciate it. So thank you, Brooke, and thank you to the League of Women Voters of Dane County. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.